Welcome to this journey of peace, love, and understanding. Today, we explore two of the most powerful and transformative teachings in Buddhism: compassion and loving kindness. These timeless virtues are at the heart of the Buddhist path, guiding us towards a life of inner peace, harmonious relationships, and spiritual awakening. Through the teachings of Metta and Karuna, we will learn how these practices not only alleviate suffering, but also open our hearts to the world around us. In a world often filled with challenges, misunderstandings, and division, these principles offer us the key to healing and connection. Join us as we delve into how compassion and loving kindness can transform our lives and create a ripple of peace that extends to others. Let's begin this exploration together and discover the power of love and empathy in our own journey towards enlightenment. In Buddhism, the teachings of compassion and loving kindness stand as foundational principles that guide both spiritual practice and everyday life. These two qualities, often referred to as Metta, loving kindness, and Karuna, compassion, are not just ideals to be admired from afar. They are practices to be embodied, cultivated, and lived out in our interactions with others and even with ourselves. At the heart of Buddhism, these virtues help to break the cycle of suffering and pave the way toward enlightenment. Compassion in Buddhism goes beyond simply feeling sympathy for others. It's a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all beings, a recognition that we share the same human experience, full of both joy and suffering, and a deep desire to alleviate that suffering in any way we can. Loving kindness, or Metta, is the unconditional, selfless love we extend to all beings, regardless of their behavior or status. It is the wish for everyone to be happy, to be free from suffering, and to experience peace. This isn't about superficial kindness, but a deep, genuine feeling of goodwill toward others. It is a state of mind that we must nurture, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. Only when we can show ourselves the same kindness we offer to others can we truly experience its transformative power. Karuna, or compassion, is often considered the active form of loving kindness. It is the heartfelt empathy we feel when we encounter others' suffering, coupled with the strong desire to help alleviate that pain. Compassion moves us to take action, whether through kind words, thoughtful gestures, or direct help. It's not passive. It compels us to engage with the world around us and to act in ways that can ease suffering. Without compassion, loving kindness can remain an ideal, a distant wish. But with compassion, it becomes a force for change. These two virtues are the foundation of what Buddhists refer to as the Brahmaviharas, or the four immeasurables, qualities that we should strive to cultivate in order to develop a compassionate and peaceful mind. Along with mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity, Metta and Karuna are not just teachings to follow, but practices to integrate into daily life. They offer a framework for personal and spiritual growth, guiding us toward inner peace, social harmony, and ultimately, enlightenment. In this discussion, we will explore how compassion and loving kindness are understood in Buddhism, why they are essential to the Buddhist path, and how we can incorporate these virtues into our own lives. By understanding and practicing these qualities, we can begin to transform not only our own experience, but also the world around us. Compassion and loving kindness are not just teachings, but are the very essence of the Buddhist way of living, a way of life that encourages us to embrace and uplift all beings with kindness, empathy, and love. Through this path, we can make a positive difference in our own lives and the lives of others, creating a ripple of peace and goodwill that extends far beyond ourselves. Section 1. The concepts of compassion and loving kindness in Buddhism. In Buddhism, compassion and loving kindness are deeply intertwined, yet they are distinct in their essence and expression. Metta, which translates to loving kindness, is the fundamental attitude of goodwill toward all beings, and it's an unconditional love that transcends personal attachment or affection. It's the sincere desire for all beings to experience happiness, peace, and freedom from suffering. This form of love does not discriminate. It's not about forming emotional attachments or loving only those we know or agree with. Instead, it is a universal wish for the well-being of all beings, regardless of their past actions, current behavior, or our personal relationships with them. On the other hand, Karuna, or compassion, is the feeling of deep empathy for the suffering of others and the urge to act in ways that relieve that suffering. Compassion, in the Buddhist context, is not just about feeling sorry for someone. It is about recognizing their pain, understanding the causes of that pain, and then taking steps to alleviate it. While loving kindness is about wishing all beings happiness, compassion is the natural response to the recognition that suffering exists in the world and needs to be alleviated. These two qualities, loving kindness and compassion, are often seen as two sides of the same coin. Metta is the attitude of unconditional, boundless love that we extend to all beings, while Karuna is the active desire to help others overcome suffering. The practice of both together is what leads to true spiritual growth in Buddhism, as they help the practitioner cultivate not just a peaceful mind, but also an engaged and compassionate heart. In many ways, Metta and Karuna challenge us to move beyond the narrow confines of self-centered thinking. In the modern world, we are often encouraged to think of ourselves first, to prioritize our own desires and comforts. However, Buddhism teaches that true happiness and peace come from the capacity to transcend self-interest and to open our hearts to others. By practicing metta, we learn to love all beings unconditionally. And through Karuna, we learn to act with empathy and compassion, extending our care to those in need, alleviating their suffering whenever possible. These principles are not just theoretical concepts, but are integral parts of the Buddhist path. By cultivating these qualities in our hearts and minds, we learn to reduce the ego and selfishness that bind us to suffering. This practice of metta and karuna ultimately leads to liberation from the cycle of suffering, samsara, helping us achieve the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, enlightenment or nirvana. Section 2. The role of compassion and loving kindness in Buddhist practice. The practice of compassion and loving kindness is not merely a philosophical idea in Buddhism. It is central to the path of spiritual development and awakening. These qualities, along with mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity, form the Brahma-viharas, the four immeasurables, integral components of the ethical and spiritual framework in Buddhism. The Brahma-viharas are practices that aim to help individuals develop a peaceful, balanced, and compassionate mind, free from attachment and hatred. Loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, are crucial to developing a peaceful mind and nurturing harmonious relationships, both with oneself and with others. These practices are not about feeling pity or sympathy for others from a distance, but about creating a genuine connection to the suffering of others and a deep desire to ease their pain. Compassion, in particular, is an essential antidote to the pervasive self-centeredness that often leads to suffering. By expanding our care for others, we open ourselves to the interconnectedness of all beings, which is a key teaching in Buddhism. When we actively cultivate loving kindness and compassion, we begin to see the world through the eyes of others. This shifts our perspective from a narrow focus on our own desires and troubles to a broader awareness of the struggles and challenges others face. The more we practice metta, the more we start to feel a sense of connection and interdependence with all living beings. Similarly, by practicing karuna, we develop the capacity to feel others' pain deeply and, more importantly, to take action to help alleviate that pain, whether through words of encouragement, acts of kindness, or selfless service. In Buddhist practice, loving kindness and compassion are often cultivated through meditation. Metta meditation encourages the practitioner to focus on sending thoughts of love and goodwill to themselves, loved ones, acquaintances, strangers, and even enemies, expanding the circle of compassion outward with each repetition. Through this practice, we not only open our hearts, but also train our minds to overcome the biases and prejudices that often block us from loving others unconditionally. Karuna meditation, similarly, encourages practitioners to contemplate the suffering of others and develop a sense of empathy for their pain. By focusing on the suffering of others, whether that suffering is physical, emotional, or spiritual, Buddhists learn to recognize the shared human experience of suffering, and this deepens their compassion. Karuna is the motivation that drives the bodhisattva path, where one strives to attain Buddhahood not just for personal enlightenment, but to help all beings achieve liberation from suffering. The practice of these qualities helps to break the cycle of ignorance, attachment, and aversion, the root causes of suffering according to Buddhist teachings. When we cultivate loving kindness and compassion, we begin to see that attachment to fleeting pleasures only leads to suffering, while true peace and freedom come from a heart that is open, generous, and free of hatred or fear. Through loving kindness and compassion, Buddhism teaches us to move from an individualistic, self-absorbed mindset to one that is collective, compassionate, and altruistic. This is not just beneficial for others, it is also essential for our own spiritual development. A peaceful mind is a key to experiencing true happiness and spiritual fulfillment, and Metta and Karuna are the pathways that lead us there. By nurturing these qualities, we gradually move toward a state of enlightenment, where suffering no longer controls our experience, and where we can act with wisdom and love for the benefit of all beings. Section 3. Compassion and loving kindness in the life of the Buddha. The life of Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as the Buddha, is a profound testament to the power and importance of compassion and loving kindness. From his journey as a prince to his quest for enlightenment, compassion and loving kindness were not merely abstract concepts for the Buddha, but guiding principles that defined his life and teachings. In his early life, Siddhartha was shielded from the harsh realities of the world. As a prince, he lived a life of luxury, isolated from sickness, aging, and death. However, upon venturing outside the palace walls, he encountered the painful realities of human existence: old age, sickness, and death. It was these encounters that awakened him to the truth of human suffering, motivating him to leave his royal life behind in search of a solution to end suffering. In his quest for enlightenment, the Buddha practiced intense meditation and self-discipline, yet despite his rigorous efforts, it was only when he embraced compassion for all beings that he reached the ultimate realization. Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree was not only a personal liberation, but also an awakening to the suffering of all beings. His understanding of suffering was not confined to his own experiences, but was deeply connected to the struggles of others. Buddha's compassion and loving kindness were not limited to his fellow seekers and disciples. One of the most famous stories of the Buddha's compassion is that of Kisa Gotami, a woman who had lost her child. Stricken with grief, Kisa Gotami went to the Buddha seeking help. Buddha, with his boundless compassion, did not simply console her, but instead, he sent her to find a mustard seed from a household that had not experienced death. After searching in vain, Kisa Gotami realized the universality of suffering. Death touches all, and no one is exempt from loss. This realization led her to acceptance, and ultimately, to her own spiritual awakening. Another significant example of Buddha's compassion can be found in the Jataka tales, stories that recount the previous lives of the Buddha. In these tales, Buddha is often portrayed as a being who selflessly sacrifices for others, showing deep compassion in every form, whether as an animal, a deity, or a human. These stories serve to illustrate that the path of compassion is not just for the Buddha, but is a practice to be followed by all. The Buddha's life exemplifies the transformative power of compassion and loving kindness. His teachings, which urge followers to cultivate metta, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion, highlight that the path to enlightenment is not one of solitary self-liberation, but one of deep empathy and selfless action toward the welfare of all beings. Through practicing compassion, the Buddha achieved not only personal freedom, but also the liberation of others from the cycle of suffering. Buddha's life serves as a model for us. It shows that by cultivating compassion and loving kindness, we can transcend personal suffering and connect with the greater human experience. These qualities are not merely ideals to strive for, but practical tools that, when implemented, can transform our lives and the lives of others. Section 4. Practical application of compassion and loving kindness in daily life. The teachings of compassion, karuna, and loving kindness, metta, are not meant to remain theoretical ideas. They are meant to be practiced. While the abstract understanding of these virtues is essential, it is through active practice that we experience the true power and transformation of these qualities in our lives. In Buddhism, the practice of metta and karuna is central to the development of a peaceful, compassionate, and harmonious life. 1. Cultivating loving kindness through meditation. One of the most direct and profound ways to cultivate loving kindness is through metta meditation. This meditation practice involves focusing on developing feelings of love and goodwill toward oneself and others. It begins with offering loving kindness to oneself, recognizing that we are worthy of peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. From there, the circle of love gradually extends to loved ones, acquaintances, strangers, and even to those with whom we may have conflicts. Metta meditation helps us to break through our natural tendency to harbor negative emotions, such as resentment, anger, or fear. By systematically offering good wishes of peace and happiness to all beings, we train our minds to become more open, non-judgmental, and compassionate. As we progress in our practice, we begin to feel a deep sense of connection to others, which can help reduce feelings of isolation, separation, and selfishness. 2. Practicing compassion in everyday life. Karuna, or compassion, goes beyond meditation. It is about actively recognizing and responding to the suffering of others. This can be seen in small, everyday actions, offering a helping hand, lending an empathetic ear, providing emotional support, or simply being present for someone who is going through hardship. Compassion asks us to notice the pain and challenges in others' lives, and to act in ways that alleviate that suffering. Compassion is not limited to major acts of kindness or charity, but can be practiced in all interactions, large and small. Every time we choose to respond to a situation with patience and understanding, we are practicing compassion. Compassionate responses might look like forgiving someone who has wronged us, offering comfort to a friend in distress, or even just being kind to strangers. 3. Compassionate listening and empathy. One of the simplest but most profound acts of compassion is active listening. By truly listening to someone's concerns, frustrations, or pain, we show them that they are valued and their suffering matters. Compassionate listening means being present in the moment, free from judgment, and offering a safe space for the other person to express themselves. Empathy plays a central role in this process. To empathize is to understand someone else's suffering by putting ourselves in their shoes. This does not mean solving their problems, but rather recognizing and honoring their feelings, offering support in any way we can. 4. Compassion in difficult situations. Practicing compassion is especially important in difficult or challenging situations. It is easy to be compassionate when things are going well, but it is in moments of conflict, suffering, or hardship that compassion is truly tested. Whether dealing with personal challenges or witnessing the suffering of others, it is essential to respond with patience, empathy, and a desire to ease that suffering, rather than react with anger, judgment, or indifference. By maintaining a compassionate mindset in challenging situations, we can avoid contributing to the cycle of negativity and instead create an atmosphere of healing and understanding. This is particularly important in personal relationships, where disagreements and conflicts are inevitable. When we approach others with compassion and loving kindness, we open the door to reconciliation and mutual growth. 5. The ripple effect of compassion. The practice of loving kindness and compassion doesn't just affect the practitioner. The effects of these practices can have a ripple effect, positively impacting the people around us. When we act with compassion, it inspires others to do the same. A simple act of kindness can create a chain reaction that spreads through our communities, making the world a more peaceful and harmonious place. Section 5. The global relevance of compassion and loving kindness. In today's interconnected world, the teachings of compassion and loving kindness are more relevant than ever. Although these virtues are central to Buddhism, they are universal values that transcend cultural, religious, and geographic boundaries. The practice of metta, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion, can be applied in any context, benefiting individuals and communities alike, regardless of their background or beliefs. In many parts of the world, we are witnessing increasing levels of division, conflict, and suffering. Whether it is political polarization, social inequality, or personal struggles, the need for compassion and loving kindness has never been more urgent. The wisdom of Buddhism, with its emphasis on understanding suffering and offering compassion, can help guide us toward a more peaceful and harmonious global community. Compassion and loving kindness are tools that not only foster personal peace, but also create collective healing. In a society marked by competition, individualism, and greed, these virtues serve as antidotes to the toxic cycles of hatred and fear that perpetuate division. When we practice loving kindness, we see beyond the labels, borders, and prejudices that separate us. Instead, we recognize our shared humanity and the common desire for peace, happiness, and well-being. On a global scale, compassionate actions, whether through acts of charity, social justice, or humanitarian work, can have profound impacts. From organizations like Doctors Without Borders to grassroots movements fighting for human rights, the world has witnessed the power of compassion in action. Buddhist monks and nuns, too, have long been at the forefront of peace-building efforts, offering both material and spiritual support to those in need. Furthermore, the practice of compassion has become a critical tool in addressing global challenges like climate change, poverty, and conflict. When we approach these issues with compassion, we begin to see the interconnectedness of all beings and recognize that the suffering of one affects the whole. This awareness encourages us to take collective action for the benefit of the planet and all its inhabitants. In addition, compassion and loving kindness have found their place in modern psychological practices, such as compassion-focused therapy, CFT. This form of therapy, which combines Buddhist principles of mindfulness with Western psychology, teaches individuals to cultivate self-compassion and extend it to others. By practicing compassion toward oneself, people can better manage stress, anxiety, and depression, leading to improved mental health and emotional well-being. Ultimately, the principles of metta and karuna offer a timeless and universal remedy for the struggles of modern life. These teachings invite us to recognize the suffering of others as our own and to respond with love, empathy, and kindness. When compassion and loving kindness guide our thoughts, words, and actions, they can transform not only individual lives, but the world at large. Section 6. Conclusion. The transformative power of compassion and loving kindness. Compassion and loving kindness are not mere theoretical concepts in Buddhism. They are practical and transformative practices that can fundamentally change the way we live our lives. These virtues serve as the foundation of the Buddhist path to enlightenment and liberation from suffering. And they also offer a powerful way for anyone, regardless of their background, to experience greater peace, happiness, and connection. By embracing Metta and Karuna, we are not only helping others, but also cultivating a mind free from the afflictions of hatred, fear, and selfishness. These qualities enable us to rise above the ego and the narrow self-interests that so often cause suffering, both for ourselves and others. They invite us to see the world through the eyes of others, fostering empathy, understanding, and a sense of shared humanity. The life of Buddha serves as the ultimate example of how compassion and loving kindness can transform not only an individual, but the world. Buddha's teachings and actions demonstrated that true peace and liberation come not from escaping suffering, but from understanding it and responding with a heart full of love and empathy. The Buddha's path invites us to engage deeply with the suffering of others, to relieve that suffering whenever we can, and to do so with a compassionate heart. Practicing loving kindness and compassion in our daily lives is an act of profound spiritual transformation. Whether through metta meditation, acts of kindness, or simply being more patient and understanding with others, these practices can lead to personal and collective healing. They enable us to respond to the challenges of life, not with anger or fear, but with an open heart and a desire to help. As we move forward in the modern world, the need for compassion and loving kindness has never been greater. These virtues provide the key to overcoming many of the issues that divide us, whether on a personal level, in our communities, or in the world at large. By incorporating these values into our daily lives, we contribute to a global movement of peace, understanding, and care for all living beings. In conclusion, Metta and Karuna are not just ideals, they are ways of being, ways of acting, and ways of transforming the world. By practicing them, we can create a more peaceful, harmonious, and compassionate world, one where suffering is alleviated, and the happiness and well-being of all beings are nurtured. Through compassion and loving kindness, we have the power to change not only our own lives, but also the world around us, making it a place of greater peace and understanding for all.